Hey guys, Smith here from Minute Maintenance coming at you. I know the scenery looks different in the background. I went from city boy to country boy, but just because I switched houses doesn't mean the project stopped. Today we're going to be changing a wheel bearing on this 2010 Chevy Impala. Let's go ahead and grab our tools and let's get some maintenance done. Hey guys, long time no see. I know it's been a minute since a video was dropped on this channel. I apologize for that. Derek and I had a bunch of projects lined up for the summer, but due to the state of the economy, a lot of people decided they didn't feel like working on the cars at the time, and they had to cancel those projects on us. I get it. Inflation's through the roof. Gas prices have borderline tripled. It's rough out there. But the owner of this particular car, you've seen this before, she started developing some issues as well. She's had this car for almost over 6 years, and she started complaining about a grinding noise coming from the front, a metallic type noise that every time she was driving, she could hear it rotationally. She could hear it when she's making her turns. That's a telltale sign, guys, that you possibly have an issue with your wheel bearing. The best way to really tell if it's your wheel bearing is not only through ears, but also by jacking up the car and moving the wheel around. And we're going to go over that as soon as we get the car jacked up. But first things first, let's go ahead and grab ourselves our three-way spinner so we can loosen up those tires, because I know it's the wheel bearing. So let's start working through this project, guy. Alright guys, first things first, we're going to grab ourselves this little four-way spinning here. Now obviously most vehicles comes with a particular lug nut loosener opener that comes in the trunk of most vehicles, but I always go out and I buy myself a four-way spinner. It comes with different size heads on it, so you can use this on multiple different size vehicles. Plus it gives you this nice X type shape, so you can really put some leverage on it to break the lug nuts loose. Now you always want to break the lug nuts loose while the vehicle's on the ground. Once the vehicle's up, the wheel tends to spin. It's balancing on a jack or jack stand. It's not really the most secure, safe thing in the world. If you're messing around with that, trying to get some lug nuts loose, sometimes they rest in place, sometimes they're pretty stuck. You're gonna have yourself a bad day. So let's go ahead and use our four-way spinner. We get a 19mm side. We'll go ahead and put it on here, and we will spin these loose. I apologize for the poor filming, guys. I'm still unloading at my new residence, and my selfie stick and stands are missing, so we're gonna have to try to figure this out together. Let's come through. Normally with two hands, go ahead and break it loose, and that's all we need. We just need it loose enough. So we're going to break that one loose right there. And then once you get the first one loose, you go ahead and loosen up all 5 of them, then we'll get the car jacked up. Alright guys, once you got it loosened up, what you want to do is come down here. Now if you look underneath here, on this particular Chevy Impala, they have this section over here. This is called my fingers around it, this is called a pinch weld section. This is actually where you're supposed to put your jack and your jack stand as well. I've had issues in the past where just because the width of my jack stand, I have a hard time putting that right next to my jack. So what I like to do is put my jack a little bit further back, somewhere along deeper on the frame, and just jack up the car that way, and then gingerly set my jack stand down on this pinch weld. Because it tends to be rusty, these things tend to rust out. Just be real careful when you're lowering it down, or if you're jacking on this, because last thing we want is for this thing to fold over and your vehicle to come crashing down. Now we've got it jacked up off the ground. I have my jack stand in a place where it's sitting down also. I like to keep my jack in there just as a quick safety in case something goes bad with the jack stand. Now one of the best ways to tell, guys, if your wheel bearing is going out, not just by the noise and the symptoms of the way it's acting, but once the vehicle's off the ground. I'm going to only have it off the ground a couple inches. See, I can get my fingers underneath there. That's all I really need. You want to grab it diagonally and rock it back and forth. See, is there any play? Is there any movement that seems out of the ordinary? This should be tied up against it. There shouldn't be any reason for this thing to go back and forth. And I'm getting I don't know if you guys are able to see the translation of that, or hear the translation of that. You can hear it bouncing back and forth from there. That's the wheel bearing, guys. So now that we got it loosened up already, thankfully, we're gonna go ahead and finish this up and get the tires off of there. Well, not tires, tire, singular, off of there. Alright guys, once you get the wheel off, the next thing you want to do is remove your brake caliper here. Now we don't have to remove the caliper itself. If we were just to move the caliper off, and it's always a good idea, guys, when you're doing work like this, whether you're working the front for the suspension or the wheel bearing, you go ahead and inspect your brakes, because obviously without brakes you can't stop, so it's a safety issue. So go ahead and inspect your brake pads. These ones are actually fine. But to remove the caliper, 13mm bolt right here, 13mm bolt right here, but we should actually be able to get just fine. We're going to cheat a little bit and leave the caliper connected. We're going to remove the caliper bracket, because this is going to be in our way as well. And that's a 15mm bolt right here, and a 15mm bolt right down there. So let's go ahead and jack on and set to lefty-loosey and loosen it up. You might need two hands. Yep. I had to extend the ratchet here, so I got a little bit more leverage, and that was definitely a two-hand job. So we'll go ahead and loosen up number 1, and I'll work on bolt number 2 below it. And once you get those 2 bolts loose, you should be able to rock this guy back and forth to remove it. And it might be a little stuck in place still a little bit C, so go ahead and get yourself a screwdriver or a crescent wrench, whatever you can, to just try to wedge in between the bracket and the rotor. So give yourself a little bit of action to work with there to help rock her free. And in no time she'll be coming right off. Be careful of this hose here, guys. That's your brake hose. You don't want to let this thing just fall completely off. Otherwise you might damage your hose. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and set this off to the side. Again, trying to keep mindful of that hose there because we don't want it to put too much pressure on the hose and break that. Now we got that out of the way. Next thing to work on is we're going to use a Torx bit, figure out which size Torx bit it is to break that set screw free so we can slide that rotor off. Alright guys, we're just using a Torx bit here. I don't know exactly, you can see how old, rusty, and janky my set is. I've had it for a long time. So Torx bit is a multi-bladed head there, you see guys. A little better view there. Multi-bladed head. I just went through and found the one that worked. That's the one we're going to get there, so then we're going to go ahead and hook up our socket wrench on that and break it free. Alright, now we're removing this, guys. As you can see how rusty this whole setup is. You can imagine how rusty that tiny little screw is going to be. Be careful with your Torx bit. Make sure you have even pressure in. Don't be putting too much downward, upward, weird angle pressure on it. You're going to break your Torx bit. Strip this out, you're going to have a hard time. Now, my Torx bit hooks into like a 1/4 inch socket, so I can use my socket wrench, or you can use like an impact drill, whatever you have on hand. But you want to try to put forward pressure in so you're holding it even, and then your second hand put downward pressure. Obviously I don't have my tripod with me, so I'm going to try to do this with one hand. Let's see what we can do. Oh, that was actually fairly simple. There we go. I have had them break in the past. I've had them damage my Torx bit, so I just want to be careful. So I'm glad this one came off very, very easily for me. It's not normally like that, so lucky ducky on my part. Once I have the set screw out of the way, this rotor should slide right off. It might be rusty, so you might have to give it a little bit of a tap with a hammer to help break it free. Tap around the face here. So let me go ahead and grab my hammer. Now I'm planning on reusing this rotor, so I don't want to damage it too bad. So I'm going ahead and wrap my sledgehammer here, my little 5-pound sledgehammer, in a towel so that I'm not having straight metal to metal contact. I'm just going to tap around the face, like here, 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 maybe even smack on the bolts a little bit if need to, because I just want to, I know it's being rested in place around the center here where it's sitting, and so that's where you kind of want to shock it to break it loose. It shouldn't take much. I want to try to avoid hitting out the front here as much as possible, because even though I have a towel on it, I don't want to damage any of this, otherwise my brake pads aren't going to work right. They're going to wear unevenly, but have noises. It's going to be annoying. So I'm just going to hit the face here, a couple love taps, and see what we can. Oh, that was all it took. And now the rotor's off. And what we're looking at right now, boys and girls, this right here, this is the wheel bearing. It's called a hub assembly. Most wheel bearings nowadays are no longer pressed in. You don't need a pulley anymore. You just need this whole thing comes off. If you look back here, this whole spinner is connected here at 3 points. 1, down there 2, 3, and those bolts are actually on the back side here. There's one of the bolts right there. You can go and see that. Another bolt's right underneath here. Other one's on the other side. So next thing's next though. We got to get a big socket and break out this axle nut. This whole thing's not going to slide off at all. Alright guys, what I'm going to use, because I have it on hand, is a 36mm axle nut. Now I know this is not the exact size, as you can see. Check this out. There's a lot more play and a lot more wiggle room than I would prefer, okay? But I'm not finding the actual axle nut I need. I got to get this job done. So again, just like with the Torx bit, I'm going to have to apply even pressure inward and even pressure downward. Don't go jarring on it, jacking on it, kicking on it, alright? If it's giving you a hard time, spray the outside down with some PB Blaster, let that soak in a little bit, some WD-40 just to loosen it up. Take your time. If you have an impact wrench, that'd be my last, just because this doesn't fit very well, that'd be my last case scenario. But sometimes you gotta go with what's good enough, guys. You know, that's the whole point of this channel. You work with what you got. I got 36mm axle nut here. It's not 100% right. There's just about 1/10 of a 1/4 of an inch of a turn there that I don't like. But we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna use 2 hands, push in, second hand, apply in the end there, and just try to slowly break her free. And there you go, guys. I had to use 2 hands because I didn't want to strip it or cause any issues. The axle nut is pretty big, it's pretty strong, but I was able to break her free. And now So go ahead and continue to work her off. Alright, and there you go, guys. That giant axle nut is off. Next thing you want to do, you want to break this shaft free. And for this one, you can take the towel off the hammer. And if you don't have a hammer on hand, and all you have is like a giant socket wrench or socket wrench with a smaller head on it, that'll actually not do that. You won't insert, you just want small enough that it'll touch the side there. You can use that to smack it loose, but we just want to break it free by giving some love taps. It pushes in, so you can see it's already starting to move a little bit, and that's all we want, is that it will be able to move when the time comes. This hammer is going to come in handy today, guys. Now, next thing we got to work on is getting the actual 3 bolts that hold in the hub assembly itself. We'll loosen those up, and then we have ourselves a wiring harness to take care of. But first things first, let's work on those bolts. All right, guys, take a look at the setup I got going on here. So if you can see from the front side here, this right there, that's the tip, the end of the bolt. It actually bolts in this direction. It is right underneath the shock tower mount here. It's very difficult to get to. So my setup, I had to use a deep socket, 13 millimeter. I don't know if you can see that. 13 millimeter socket and an extension, just so I could fit everything back there to my wrench, so I can start rocking it loose. You can see how rusty it is. Wouldn't be a bad idea to hit the front side of here and the other spots with some PB Blaster, WD-40, let that soak in. But take your time, no rush. Last thing you want to do is strip this thing out. I had to use 2 hands, obviously, to break it free, and slowly but surely, that top one's coming out. And that tends to be the most difficult one. And there you go, that first top one, like I said, that tends to be the most difficult one, and they tend to be held in with like some sealant here, some thread locker. So we'll go ahead and back that one out. So now let's move on down here to the bolt that's located right here, right behind this wiring harness. Let's go and get this wire unclipped. This speed sensor is actually attached to the hub assembly. Just as you can see, this is tab right there. I'm going to pull it off first. There's this tab right back here. Boop, boop. Just use your thumb, pull it, and pull it straight down. And now we can work on getting this bolt out. Angle that camera up right there. Same size socket, 13 millimeter. And there you go, guys. We got all 3 bolts out. Now what you want to do again, you want to make sure that you were able to smack on that. Look at that. I can push it with my thumb. Smack on that shaft note that you were able to break it loose. And then when you start smacking around the face here, hitting it from all sorts of angles, I don't want to, it's going to be loud. I'm not going to do it on video, but smack it on the face on all sorts of different angles. What you're trying to do is you're trying to shock the mount back here. And as you can already see, I hit it a couple times, so it's starting to pull itself away because this whole thing tends to get rusted and frozen in place into the steering knuckle. And so just smack on the face here, smack at different angles. If you can get the hammer, obviously I can't, great. If not, grab yourself an extension that you don't actually need and you're not using, and just put it up against there, smack, 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 and hit the other end, obviously, with the hammer to start breaking loose. So you can actually get like a screwdriver or a pry bar back there to pull it out the rest of the way, and that's what we're going to work on now. And there you go, guys. The hub assembly came off. I had to smack it. I went ahead and took the hammer, and while I was in place, I hit the backside, so my thumb is there, hit the backside, trying to force it out this direction. And look how rusty all that is. Now, try to remember the positioning of this, guys. It's going to flop on you a little bit, but try to remember the position so you can put that little dust plate back. Not the end of the world. That gets damaged or bent, so you can't put it back, but look at all the rust that's there, guys. So that thing was seized in place pretty good. This is a bad hub assembly. We'll go ahead and grab a good one and get that going. But first things first, actually, stay tuned. Grab yourself a wire brush, guys. Do yourself a favor. Slide this off to the side. Do yourself a favor, take a wire brush. It doesn't have to be this big. Go through. Look at that. Look how much cleaner that is already. Go ahead and clean up all the bonding. Anywhere where it looks like we got some old grease there, because you want to put some grease on there as well. Anywhere it looks like metal is going to touch, just go ahead and take a wire brush. So I get all that cleaned up. It'll save yourself a lot of headaches in the future and make everything fit a lot better. Alright, guys, once you get that all cleaned up, again, I always have to compare part for part, and good thing I did, because now I'm realizing I didn't pay attention to it. Look, guys, I'm missing a lot of the casing from this hub assembly. It ended up getting itself broken off and sticking behind inside of here, you see? So good thing I marked part for part, otherwise I'd be all sorts of confused as to, hey, why isn't this thing working right? And that might explain why. Let's go ahead and break this free over here off of that clip. That might explain why it wasn't functioning right for us. But we're going to get that wire yanked off. But you can take a look here. I don't know if you can hear this at all with all the wind in the background, but I can feel the metal grinding. I can hear it as opposed to a nice smooth sensation right there. Very different. So we're going to go ahead and finish cleaning up, getting the rest of that broken hub assembly out of here, and we're going to start working on installing the new one. Alright guys, I went ahead and put some lubricant on the outside of all the metal here. After you get cleaned up with sandpaper, with a scraper, with a wire brush, whatever you got on the inside and outside, clean it up as best you can, and then go ahead and wipe it off with a rag or hit it with an air compressor to get the debris out of there. I went ahead and put some lubricant on here. Now, there's actual lubricant, there's anti-seize. It's just to prevent the metal from just rusting in place like it did the last time. Now, once you go ahead and put it on all the spots that you think, you know what, I know metal's gonna be pushed up against here, and then bolted in, holding that tight bottom. The metal's gonna be touching on the inside, metal's gonna be against the CV shaft here. Don't forget, guys, before you start putting your assembly back on, don't forget to realign that cat where you got it from, and then we'll start working, put a hub assembly on and feeding the wire through the shaft there. And there we go. I got the brake dust protector back in place there. I got the wire fed through. As you can see, she's doing a little dangling action down there. And I got the hub assembly lined up, and again, there's splines on the inside here, as you can see on the old bad one here, that line up with splines on the actual shaft itself. But the shaft's still allowed to move, so you can move it around a little bit, but make sure you get the splines lined up and then work it on there. And always 1, 2, 3 bolts in hand tight first. Before we go in, I'll get this top one in hand tight first. So I'm gonna hit it with that 13mm wrench and tighten everything down. And we're going the exact opposite now, so we're just reassembling. All right, hub assembly is reassembled, bolted in place there. Good to go. I went ahead and reconnected my little sensor over here and reclipped it in place there. It comes with an extra plastic retention clip in case the one you had broke on there. If you want to use zip ties or whatever to hold it in place, you're just holding it up against this brake booster. That way it doesn't just fall down and start dangling all over the place and catch a stray stick in the road, or some homeless guy that you ran over reaching out. Oh, don't do that. Reaching out to grab something, grab a hold of that wire. Then all of a sudden, my speed sensor's not working. I'm like, hey, jerk move, homeless guy. What are you doing? All right, next thing's next. Once we got that put in place, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our rotor on. But look at, same principles before. Look at how rusty it is back here. First, we're going to take a sandpaper, a Brillo pad, wire brush, whatever we got. We're going to clean this up. We're going to add a little bit more of that anti-seize stuff so that's not sticking to this. Then we're going to reassemble our rotor. And look at that. Went ahead and cleaned it up. We're going to go ahead and reinsert our rotor in place, keeping in mind that this hole here is for that set screw, and where the set screw is lined up on here, so make sure we got our rotor in the right spot. All right, now I got the set screw put back in place. Our rotor's where it needs to be, and now we got to get that axle nut on there. Now I know what you think. I took the rotor off, then I took the axle nut off the last time. It doesn't really matter whether you put the axle nut on first or after, or take the rotor off first or after. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, I did the opposite the last time, but either way, it's still going to go on there. So we'll take our axle nut and we'll put it back on there. Now, if you were thinking before, hey, I didn't have the shaft through all the way, I'm nervous, I'm grabbing this trying to pull it. When you put the axle nut on there, it's going to start, as you're tightening it, once you get it to the position it needs to be on, it's going to start pulling the shaft out, and so it's going to line everything up just the way you like it. So don't worry about that. If you're wondering, hey, what's the foot pounds for the axle nut? Guys, this isn't a 100% professional channel. This is a good enough channel. This is for soccer moms. This is for college kids. This is for dads at home trying to stretch their budget. They don't want to pay somebody else to do a job for them. This hub assembly was $40. To pay somebody else to change this whole hub assembly, you're looking at $400 or $500, okay? I don't know the exact foot pounds. If you're really curious about that, because you got yourself a PSI type socket wrench, so you know, a torque wrench, so you know exactly how much foot pounds are on there, cool. If it's hand tight, it's bound to be right. Those are my rules in life, all right? Something like this, if it's two hand tight, it's bound to be right. On most things, bolts, if it's one hand tight, it's bound to be right. So let's go ahead and wrench that guy down. There you go, accents in there. Next, and last, well, not last because we got the tire, but just the brake caliper bracket here. Let's go and line that up, work that sucker back on. That shouldn't be too difficult because obviously we didn't take the pads off, so all the pads are exactly the same. And again, you stop tuning and check your pads, make sure those are good to go. So we're going to swap those out while we're working on this, but we're going to put this cat back in place and bolt it down. All right, guys, now the brake caliper is back in place. Last but not least, reinstall the fell on my foot. Reinstall the tire. Alright guys, and there you go, all reassembled. So the hub assembly is a very simple thing to change the wheel bearing. They come in a hub assembly nowadays for most newer vehicles, so it's a lot easier as opposed to having to pull in, push in, or press out an old wheel bearing. Guys, I apologize, I'm off my game a little bit. I haven't filmed the video in a hot minute. A lot of projects getting canceled on me. Fortunately, my vehicles haven't broken down anytime recently, so I haven't had much practice, and I'm missing my selfie stick and all my equipment as far as holding my phone, so I'm gonna get that stuff found as soon as I get things organized at my new place here, and my film quality is gonna go right back up there. But please like, subscribe, drop any comments, questions you guys might have below, and as always, please guys, save money. Inflation's through the roof, gas is ridiculous. Take some time out of your own day, find a minute to do some maintenance. We'll catch you next time.